Not only is he a friend, but he's a spokesman for a system. He's a spokesman for the passions and the interests that we've got. And I think one of the things that he underscored so well, Jerome, was that all these things that the governments are trying to do, going back to 1943 and now looking ahead for the next 15 years, is not just because the UN wants it. That's an organization. It's because the member countries want those things, need those things, and have to decide what those things would be. And that is also, as Jerome has said, a function of what civil society is saying, what civil society is doing. And I think that's one of the takeaways for college students and high school students who are here, as well as us who are older, that an organization is only as good as its members. And the UN is only as good as its member countries and as good as the people. And that's a good transition to where we're going next. We're going to these Global Citizen Awards. And this is a manifestation of the importance of civil society. Governments are going to do their things, but without civil society working and organizing together, those goals of peace and human security can't be fulfilled. So let me just explain very briefly. These awards have been given, as you know now, this is the 9th year. You will see the winners of the past Global Citizen Awards. You saw it in the center of your program. It includes one evening on this stage when we had 22 of the Nobel Peace Prize winners who were having a party because they all shared the prize for the environment. They had never had a party for their Nobel Peace Prize, and they had it here. And we have had student groups who've been honored, we've had philanthropists, we've had entrepreneurs, we've had NGOs, student groups of all kinds, service organizations, and tonight we have 3 very, very special organizations who have been selected because of their exemplary work, because of the example they give, and because they demonstrate to all of us, young and old, that we can make a difference by joining these organizations, by donating to them, by volunteering with them, by becoming their agents if they're working in a foreign country. All of them, you will hear, have this important international dimension. So we have this great history, and it is taking a next step tonight. So I would like to first to call up Jan Passion and Gilda Bettencourt from the Nonviolent Peaceforce, along with David McGaffrey and Jerome, if you would come and join me, because we will be doing, as they come up, I will tell you, we will be presenting them with an award, the Global Citizen Award, and then we will have an opportunity, as people have in the past 9 years, to hear what their story is that makes them so special.
Years ago, Herb and I started talking about a new program to recognize ordinary people in the East Bay, people like you and I, who are making a global difference in promoting UN goals. And at first we were a little nervous. Would we find people worth honoring as global citizens? For 9 years we've been giving these awards, and our astonishment grew year by year, not because we had any difficulty finding people, but because of the astounding quality of the people we found year after year. This year we got nervous again. We picked for our theme, peace and human security. That's the business of governments and armies. Can we find ordinary people who made a difference? I'll leave it up to you to decide whether our continued confidence was worth it. Nonviolent Peaceforce is an organization which puts unarmed civilian people into conflict situations, attempting to prevent, reduce and stop violence and create local solutions to ensure a lasting change. We all know about peacekeepers wearing blue helmets and driving armored personnel carriers and trained soldiers, but putting unarmed civilians into these conflict situations is something. Well, I remember a young presidential candidate who wrote a book called Profiles in Courage. I think this could be another chapter of that book. I'd like to recognize in particular two people, Joan Bernstein, and I apologize that we don't have a ramp, and so she is seated in front of you at table number 2, and Jan Passion, the founders of Nonviolent Peaceforce, and Gilda Bettencourt, who is currently with Nonviolent Peaceforce, and will be explaining to us a little bit of what they do.
On behalf of the hundreds of Nonviolent Peaceforce staff from around the world, I am honored, along with my colleague and comrade Joan Bernstein, to receive this year's Global Citizen Award. I'm going to talk just briefly about my time with Nonviolent Peaceforce, and then Gilda's going to give a bit more of the background. When Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated, he was developing this idea of a Shanti Sena, a peace army, an army without violence. Nonviolent Peaceforce, along with other unarmed civilian peacekeeping organizations, seeks to implement this idea. How can we respond to violence, to war, to trauma, to killing, to rape, without more violence? And Nonviolent Peaceforce seeks to answer that question. I was fortunate enough to work with Nonviolent Peaceforce for several years in Sri Lanka during the ceasefire and then during the unraveling of that ceasefire. And one of the stories, what we try to do is to build the space for civil society in Sri Lanka to build their own peace. And so one way to make that real is how do we do that without weapons, without power, traditional power? And one of the things we did was to help reduce the practice of recruitment and abduction of children to serve as soldiers. And a story that I just want to share was that in the eastern part of Sri Lanka, at one point there were 26 kids who were taken from a village. And the parents and the kids were pretty unhappy about that. They were really devastated. But there was a sense of powerlessness about how do you respond to that. And they connected with local Sri Lankan activists who connected with UNICEF, who connected with Nonviolent Peaceforce, and together as civilians and the UN, with the local activists, we went to the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, the tiger camp, where these kids were being held, and confronted them about this along with their parents. And the next day, the Tigers sent these kids home. And so just one story. Just one story when I was there where we were able to have an impact on the lives of these 26 kids and to leverage civil society without violence to pressure the Tigers to not take these kids. So I want to thank you for this award and thank you for your time and share a little bit more with Gilda.
It is my pleasure to read a little bit from Joan Bernstein. She has passed a letter on with me in acceptance of her award. At the same time, there may be some photos of other people from Nonviolent Peaceforce. I think Joan would very much appreciate you seeing the faces of people behind Nonviolent Peaceforce, all the folks that helped create it. Joan and Jan were two of the founding people of the organization, whose jobs was to take something that didn't exist and help create an organization where people from all over the world came to help people that they never met, but people who are in threat from violent conflict. And let me share a little bit of what Joan has written. Joan says, I want to thank the UN chapter of the East Bay for this Global Citizen Award. It gives me great symmetry. It gives symmetry to what I have been able to accomplish in my life. In 1967, I received the first prize in an essay contest conducted by the Brooklyn chapter of the UNA. 47 years later, you did not know how much it would mean to me to receive this bookend award. NP is an attempt by civilian NGOs to do something their governments and the UN, which is controlled by governments, has yet been unable to do. End the world's many conflicts, acting as civilians. Those of us who began NP were generalists. Jan Passion, my co-recipient, was both NP's first field team leader of our first project and the lead coordinator of most of our large meetings involving participants from over 50 countries and more cultures needing to provide their food, their religious preferences, and for their complex travel and visa arrangements. Joan's formal position was North America Regional Coordinator, which made her very responsible for the regional training in the US and Canada, for all Nonviolent Peace Force's organizational relationships with the US and Canada, including with 19 member organizations, lobbying Congress, and establishing relationships and collecting information to figure out NP's experiences, could help many groups that are fighting inner city violence in the US. In addition to the staff assignment of coordinating the development of the strategic plan, now known as Nonviolent Peace Force's long-term plan. Although there had been some electronic communication, she did not know or what to expect or what the delegates would want from these regional meetings. We had people all over the world coming together to shape Nonviolent Peace Force for its future. The outcome was regional discussions and much of a part of the NP's action and areas and outcomes. A number of insightful suggestions for improvement and great openness to the ideas of delegates from other regions. During 2 following days in informal discussions, a number of plan amendments and related resolutions were drafted, most of the product of combined proposals and concerns from 2 or 3 different cases, preparation for local, regional, and international work in the field from all 6 regions of the globe. You can step a moment and think of what it would be like for all of the world to come into agreement about some things. This was what happened in Nonviolent Peace Force. Joan says that she is proud of the fact that so many of the people who created Nonviolent Peace Force used their skills and in reaching across different points of view that came mainly from the differences of life experience. So many of those participants attending this assembly and nonviolent groups from both areas with much conflict to places where people can usually expect to live a daily life of a war-free environment. Quite a span. Joan is also proud that she had the ability to facilitate the agreement of full consensus among 50 or so organizations for the long-term plan. Not just in words, but serious commitment to make actions needed to carry out those objectives. Her greatest disappointment, though, was the inability to financially sustain this participation of these groups based in war-torn regions, and also in the only place that had financial stability was North America and Western Europe. Only 3 of the 29 attendees of Africa represented by an African NP member organization were able to participate in the meeting. And I'm finishing up the notes. Joan has derived tremendous energy from the opportunity to meet and engage with so many amazing people and NP staff, and to help unarmed civilian peacekeeping to grow into a larger reality. She hopes that you can feel some of that energy too, and as you think about the difficult work that lies ahead. Before I leave, I was asked to share an example of when Nonviolent Peaceforce has worked together with the United Nations, which we do quite a bit. In fact, the United Nations is our largest funder at the moment. And the example that I will share with you is the first one that came to my mind. We are currently in South Sudan. We have about 200 unarmed civilian peacekeepers in about 6 different offices in South Sudan. It's our largest project. We're also in Mindanao in the Philippines. We've started a project in Myanmar, and we have done also work in Sri Lanka and Guatemala. The example that came to my mind was in a part of South Sudan called Cabasso, and this was even before the recent civil war had broke out last December. There was a very high level of gender-based violence, rape, and just violence assault on average civilians. And Nonviolent Peaceforce came to the situation and reached out to the people in the community and tried to find a solution to see what they could do. This is just such a serious problem. And they tackled it by organizing a phone tree, setting up weekly meetings in the community to improve their own safety, and also working with the UN mission to have regular patrols, 24 hours. NP would do a patrol, the UN would do a patrol, and the UN police would do another patrol. And they would specifically focus on areas like where water is pumped and the women's garden, because these were areas that were often targeted and women felt very vulnerable. In the month before they started this program, there was 105 cases of rape and assaults that were reported. And it's such a shame to be attacked in South Sudan. This is probably just a small figure. A lot of people don't report the abuse that they've experienced. After they set up this new program of patrolling with the UN and the weekly meetings, and they did the analysis, and they had the following month only had 3, I'm not exaggerating, 3 cases that were reported of gender-based violence and violent assaults. And this continued on for some while. And they were even suspicious at their own success and went into the community and trying to look for other factors. And they constantly got the same message: no one has ever worked so hard for our own security. And it is you who have made this difference, working together with the UN patrol as well. You can find a very detailed explanation of this case on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and you look up Nonviolent Peaceforce, there's a 17-minute explanation into how this was done. And the UN was very excited about it, sent a team to come and study the situation and try to mimic it in its other work. So if you go to this door, there's a table of information on Nonviolent Peaceforce. I recommend that all of you take at least one little thing, a bookmark, a brochure, our latest newsletter, just so you can remember what I've shared with you about Nonviolent Peaceforce. And the message that I want to leave with you is the next time you see the news or something that leaves you feeling so powerless, how can you help people on the other side of the world in violent situations that they need assistance? Do not feel powerless. Nonviolent Peaceforce was created by people who felt just the same way and wanted to help people who needed that assistance. So get the little reminder that you're going to take with you and look at that and feel empowered, because you have much more power than you know. Thank you.
Empowered just listening to them. Congratulations, Joan, Jan. Thank you, Gilda, as well, and all of you who've come at the table here to share in this celebration. Next, I wanted already to have Jerome share with me for the second award, and I wanted to call up Mona Masri of the International Rescue Committee. And while she's coming up, actually, let me tell you, I had not introduced David McGaffey. He kind of introduced himself. He's been an advisor to the chapter for these years, a tremendous help. He's a former State Department official. He was on the governing body of the union. The significance of these Global Citizen Awards.
The International Rescue Committee, IRC. IRC responds to the world's worst humanitarian crisis and helps people to survive and rebuild their lives. At work in over 40 countries and 22 US cities to restore safety, dignity, and hope. The IRC leads the way from harm to home as the only resettlement agency which provides life-saving services, both internationally and domestically. IRC is able to provide a continuum of comprehensive services, which is unparalleled in the humanitarian aid world. In the US, the IRC works with individuals designated by the UNHCR, the refugee agency, as refugees or as asylees, to provide critical services to enable them to move from basic survival to thriving in their new home. These services include the provision of housing, connection to public benefits, workforce development, educational scholarships, financial education and coaching, health and well-being programs, women's protection and empowerment, food security, community gardening, counseling for victims of trafficking and immigration services. All IRC services are in alignment with the UN Millennium Development Goals. This past year, the IRC provided the services to over 1,300 refugees and asylees within 4 offices in Northern California, including Oakland, Sacramento, San Jose, and Turlock. Over 400 individuals were resettled in the Oakland office alone.
IRC staff and some of our most recent clients, Abia from Iraq, and also the Panupati family from Sri Lanka. So, as was just iterated, I'm Mona Masri. I'm the Executive Director for the Northern California region for the International Rescue Committee. We're actually an 80-year-old humanitarian aid organization. As was mentioned, we work in over 40 countries and 22 cities in the United States. I want to start with a sobering statistic, and then I'm going to play a little video. Today, there are over 50 million people who have been forcibly displaced from their homes, a level that we've not seen since World War II. And right now, due to the most recent conflict in Syria, there are over 3 million refugees that are seeking shelter in neighboring countries. Since we're an 80-year-old organization, these sobering statistics bring home the critical need for IRC's mission as a humanitarian aid organization to help the world's most vulnerable populations move from harm to home by providing life-saving operations. More specifically, what we've done internationally over the last year is provided 13 million people with primary and reproductive health care, gave 1.4 million individuals access to clean water and sanitation services, vaccinated almost 280,000 children against diseases. And our IRC-supported clinics helped 272 women deliver healthy babies. We've provided schooling and educational opportunities to 725,000 girls and boys and trained over 20,000 educators. We've provided counseling and cared for 12,000 vulnerable children and provided skills training or access to financial services to another 12,000 youth. We've counseled and provided essential services to over 27,000 survivors of gender-based violence and educated and mobilized over 1.3 million men, women, and children to lead prevention efforts in their communities. We've created almost 230 village savings and loans programs and that have benefited almost 15,000 individuals. We've provided almost 180,000 farmers with agriculture and agribusiness training and provided legal counseling to more than 20,000 people through our IRC-supported legal centers. And each year in the United States, we resettle approximately 10,000 individuals, as I mentioned, in about 22 different cities. Here in Northern California, we resettle approximately 1,300 each year, and this is an increase from about 860 last year. And to give you a sense, unfortunately we know that it's going to continue in the foreseeable future. The general populations that we've served in the past have been from Somalia, Sudan, Eritrea, Sri Lanka, Burma, Bhutan, Nepal, and more recently we're seeing refugees coming from the Congo and Syria, and many, many more coming from Afghanistan due to the United States pulling out. And what I'd like to do after we show a quick video is to talk a little bit about how we link our international programs with our domestic programs here. So we can play the video.
قصف عشوائي ما يعادل ما في يوم إلا بينزل من 50 ل 60 صاروخ ما في وقت محدد الصباح الظهر نص الليل.
People we're working with are just like you and me. They had a house, a car, money in the bank. They've lost everything.
Oh, there's a very sick child, sir.
If this child hadn't come in here,
Yeah.
would he have been alive tonight?
No, I don't think. I don't think.
This place is the shelter for the women and girls to get the safety.
This is what I would call a slow burn emergency.
if we stay in Iran, all my kids gonna kidnapping or killing. The IRC received us from the airport, from the first moment. Give me here a new life, and I found everything.
But as a professional aid worker, you don't just see problems, you see solutions. So you know that there's ways you can change that situation and you can transform it. We know how to do that. It is not a hopeless situation.
Has international and domestic operations, and this is really unparalleled in the humanitarian world because it allows us to have a continuum of services that provides these comprehensive critical supports that people need. So what we do domestically in the US, we're known very well for our international programming, but not many people know about our domestic programming. And what we do here is we're the first people that our clients see when we pick them up from the airport, and we take them to their new home, we help them find a job, and provide them with financial education so they understand the U.S. financial system. We help them with career coaches so that they understand that they might start out with a survival job, but we want to help them build the career of their dreams. We provide them with access to health and well-being programs, food security, to ensure that they understand how to eat healthy and how to be healthy in the United States. We also have an urban farming and community garden program because a lot of our clients come from agrarian backgrounds. So we actually have a plot here by Laney College where we give clients space to actually grow food from their countries of origin. We also have counseling for victims of trafficking and immigration services because everybody who comes as a UN designated refugee is expected to become a U.S. citizen. So we provide them with civics classes and all of the resources that they need to do that, including family reunification for people who would like to actually bring their families over as well. So our programming is aligned both with UN mandate and the Millennium Goals about reducing poverty and hunger, promoting gender equality, improving maternal health, and promoting universal education. And as we mentioned, unfortunately, the number of refugees is going to continue for the foreseeable future. But we'll continue to build our programs and services that address the most critical needs of our world's most vulnerable populations to ensure that they not only have the chance to survive, but thrive in their new communities. And so I want to thank you very much for this award and this honor, and let you know if you're interested in getting involved in any way by donating or by volunteering, please do let us know. Our website is rescue.org, and if you just type in Northern California, all the information about our local programming will come by, or you can visit our table, and our volunteer coordinator is actually here. Thank you again very much.
Well, we're almost done. If you would like to stand up for a minute. Actually, it's past the 7th inning stretch at San Francisco, and the score is still 2-0. Baumgartner is still pitching, top of the 8th, and he's got a 4-hit game going, I believe. So if you want to stretch, we will, and we will be done. We're on schedule, and we will be done very soon. While you are stretching, I would like to invite Rita Marin and also Jackie Cabasso up from the Western States Legal Foundation. But as they're coming also, let me speak on behalf of everybody and thank once again the International Rescue Committee. You've given us, I think, a new sense of humanity, a new sense of human security for the wonderful work you've done. And your whole table, congratulations to you, your team, and to the people who are at your table who you are serving. Okay. I mentioned Gilda already to you. She has been a board member. She was my predecessor as president of this organization. She is very, very deeply involved in many community activities and the advocacy work of our organization. It's a pleasure to have her present and introduce the next award.
Thank you, Herb. Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to see people here again. And to go back to basic principles just for a moment. In the United Nations Charter, by which all of this is created, the first purpose is international peace and security. We won't go into the merit or the problems created by those words. That is the primary purpose of the United Nations. At the time that this began, we were all concerned about the release of atomic energy, nuclear weapons in the world. Crises come and go in our society. We're now suffering a crisis with the Ebola issue. And periodically we have other issues that come and go. The nuclear problem has not been resolved. We are talking with North Korea at this point on that very topic. The Western States Legal Foundation, headed by Jackie Cabasso, whom I'm introducing, is one of the more quiet, I would call them, quiet and effective organizations. They partner with other NGOs from, the list goes on from Quakers through Zimbabwe, around the world, and both doing the research on what's happening on nuclear weaponry and on the productivity that's going on, the kind of productivity we would rather not see. And they do the research, and Jackie Cabasso has traveled worldwide in pursuit of the ways to make this problem go away. It has not yet happened. Jackie will not give up, I know that very well. She partners with the other organizations and she follows the UN Charter's primary mandate, which we can much appreciate. There was one line I just wanted to read to you. Jackie is the chair, of the mayors for North American coordinator for the Mayors for Peace and carries several full-time loads. The Conference of Mayors called on the United States quite recently, a month or two ago, to demonstrate a good faith commitment to its disarmament obligations by commencing a process to negotiate the global elimination of nuclear weapons within a time-bound framework under strict and effective international control. Those words wrap it up. The goal is set, the importance of it is clear, and crises come and go and will come and go. We must always remember that there are organizations and Western States Legal Foundation under the leadership of Jackie Cabasso and her colleague in New York, John Burroughs, who works at the New York office, are there on the spot. And we will get the kind of attention to this, and our members of Congress hear from them in coalition with all the other NGOs that take this as a necessary concern. We are very grateful that this work goes on under Jackie's fine leadership. Thank you, Jackie.
Let me read for you what we're giving away to these folks. It says Global Citizen Award for effective contributions to peace and human security, and it's from our United Nations Association in the East Bay, and it's a pleasure to give this third one also to Jackie and Andy and the team over here.
My clipboard is the UN color. So I want to thank very much the United Nations Association East Bay Chapter, and I'm very happy to accept this award on behalf of the Western States Legal Foundation Board and our supporters. Western States Legal Foundation's Board of Directors is a remarkable hands-on working group whose members share the organization's commitment to social transformation through nonviolence and democratic, non-hierarchical decision-making. They provide a wealth of skills and expertise and actively participate in the organization's many activities. I would like to introduce the Western States Table, Table 6. First of all and foremost, my wonderful mother, need I say more, and Cabasso. And next to my mother is Andy Lichterman. Andy is Western States Senior Research Analyst, and he's the other staff member. He is the human computer who I totally depend on for research and analysis, and we've worked together at Western States for over 30 years. Andy? Is the president of our board and has been since 1995. Yay, Phyllis. Marcia Campos and Sherry Larson-Beville, other board members who are here. Thank you both. And Mike Valuba, our indomitable counsel to the foundation and litigator par excellence. Other board members who are not able to be here tonight are Dale Nesbitt, John Burrows, Wilson Rouse, and Heather Davison, and Danette Lambert. Back to the table. Good, the photos are showing. James Larriger, a longtime friend. He's a member of the Guild of Atomic Photographers, and I note that some of his photos are showing behind me. Putting together these photos made me very proud of how we've been working steadily for many years to link issues of nuclear disarmament, peace, justice, and environmental sustainability in an effort to build the broad, multi-issue progressive movement we'll need to effect meaningful social change. Rounding out our table, our friends and supporters Grace Morizawa and Anthony Abdallah. Thank you all. Western States Legal Foundation is a community, like a family. Over all these years, we've become good friends and a mutual support team. I'm often asked, how did we get our name? Western States Legal Foundation got its start in 1982, providing legal representation for nonviolent activists arrested protesting construction of the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. I was arrested there myself a number of times. Western States was formed to counter the right-wing Pacific Legal Foundation, which was asserting that the nonviolent protesters had injured PG&E workers and was trying to force the arrestees to pay for law enforcement costs. We prevailed. In the early 1980s, Western States, as part of the anti-nuclear movement in California, shifted its focus from Diablo Canyon to the Livermore Nuclear Weapons National Laboratory, and from nuclear power to nuclear weapons. Though I must say that with Fukushima, we kind of came full circle and we attend to both heads of this two-headed dragon. Our activities have evolved to encompass a broad range of research, advocacy, and organizing. Western States does extensive original research and analysis and produces in-depth issue briefs, as well as shorter fact sheets and guides. Our staff writes articles and chapters for books and other publications, and we speak extensively at events in the Bay Area, throughout the country, and around the world, including in UN forums. From our local work with the People's Nonviolent Response Coalition and the New Priorities Campaign, to our national work with United for Peace and Justice, to our international work with the Abolition 2000 Global Network to Eliminate Nuclear Weapons and Mayors for Peace, Western States has been instrumental in raising the visibility and importance of nuclear disarmament as a central issue in the struggle against U.S. empire and global military-industrial complexes. But why are nuclear weapons still important? In January of this year, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists wrote to Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and the members of the UN Security Council, warning that the doomsday clock now stands at 5 minutes to midnight, primarily due to the twin existential threats posed by nuclear weapons and climate change. The very first United Nations resolution in 1946 called for the elimination of nuclear weapons. But 2.5 decades after the end of the Cold War, over 16,000 nuclear weapons, most held by the US and Russia, pose an intolerable threat to humanity due to the ever-present potential for use, whether intentional, accidental, or due to miscalculation. The International Committee of the Red Cross has warned that incalculable human suffering will result from any use of nuclear weapons, and that there could be no adequate humanitarian response. Despite the 45-year-old commitment enshrined in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, there are no nuclear disarmament negotiations on the horizon. Over the past 3 years, there has been a marked uptick in nuclear disarmament initiatives by governments not possessing nuclear weapons, both within and outside the UN. But the US has been missing in action at best and dismissive or obstructive at worst. Nuclear-armed countries are spending over $100 billion a year on nuclear weapons and related costs. The US government is officially committed to modernizing its nuclear bombs and warheads, the submarines, missiles, and aircrafts that carry them, and the laboratories and plants that design, maintain, and manufacture nuclear weapons. Russia's nuclear weapons programs and policies closely mirror those of the US and are also reflected in the other nuclear weapon possessing states. The US is poised to spend more than $1 trillion over the next 30 years to maintain and modernize the US nuclear arsenal and infrastructure to support it. Every hour, the US now spends almost $2 million on nuclear weapons. By 2030, it will be spending nearly $4 million on nuclear weapons and missiles every hour. The University of California, where we're meeting this evening, has managed the US nuclear weapons laboratories at Livermore and Los Alamos since their inception, and today is part of a management team that includes Bechtel, Babcock & Wilcox, URS Corporation, and Battelle. With conflicts raging around the world and the post-World War II order crumbling, we are now standing on the precipice of a new era of great power wars. The potential for wars among nations possessing nuclear weapons is growing. So what can we do? We need to move from the irrational fear-based ideology of deterrence to the rational fear of an eventual nuclear weapons use, whether by accident or design, by some nuclear weapon possessing state that places the threatened use of nuclear weapons at the core of its national security policy. We also need to stimulate a rational hope that security can be redefined in humanitarian and ecologically sustainable terms that will lead to the elimination of nuclear weapons and dramatic demilitarization, freeing up tremendous resources desperately needed to address universal human needs. To delegitimize nuclear deterrence as a step towards abolishing nuclear weapons, our task is to change the discourse from the bottom up. Changing the discourse will require the courage not only to speak truth to power, but also to speak truth to each other. And when it comes right down to it, I believe this is the only thing we can do, but it could not be more important. To this end, Western States Legal Foundation is right now coordinating a non-governmental organization statement on nuclear weapons in the international security context, which will be presented to the United Nations First Committee, which deals with disarmament and international security next week. And I'm very happy to say that so far we have more than 90 organizational endorsers from around the world. In his August 6, 2024 Peace Declaration, Hiroshima Mayor Kazumi Matsui, President of Mayors for Peace, declared, "Each one of us will help determine the future of the human family. Please put yourself in the place of the Hibakusha, the A-bomb survivors. Imagine their experiences, including that day from the depths of hell, actually happening to you or someone in your family. To make sure the tragedies of Hiroshima and Nagasaki never happen a third time, let's all communicate, think, and act together with the Hibakusha for a peaceful world without nuclear weapons and without war." So, given this grim reality, how does Western States Legal Foundation keep going? Well, we maintain a wicked sense of humor, and we try to have fun. At the best of times and the worst of times, we play miniature golf together. Really. We also depend on the financial support of hundreds of loyal individual donors. But we're not only asking for money, we're asking for jewelry. Our 5th Baubles to Bling All Jewelry Benefit Flea Market will take place December 13th, and we're collecting donated jewelry now. So please come by our table, that's table number 6, to pick up a flyer. Thank you very much.
I feel a great new sense of appreciation for what people can do. We started with a celebration of the United Nations, but also a recognition of the importance of civil society. And our UN association has got to work on all levels. These 3 organizations, to me, certainly give us a new sense of what peacekeeping can mean through the UN and through civil society. Humanitarian support and humanity through the UN and its agencies, but also through civil society. A new appreciation of the efforts in peacekeeping and weapons control and the frustrations and limitations through the UN and the glorious advocacy, the strong work by Western States Legal Foundation on another aspect of reducing weapons. And as Jackie said, and I've heard this recently, and I think it is so true, Jerome mentioned it too, existential threats, the threat to the existence of our planet, come from blowing ourselves up with weapons or destroying our planet through allowing the earth and our stewardship of the earth to go to hell. Okay? It's strong stuff. And I would like to ask you to please join me in thanking these 3 tremendous organizations and the inspiration they have given to us today. Thank you for sharing your stories and for speaking the truth.